Yes, indeed. Yep. Welcome. And how are you? Good? Good. We were hoping so. By we, I mean me and me. Deeper issues that will not be explored. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Harry Potter Abridged. We are, if you're not just joining us for the first time, but even if you are, we're going to tell you that we are reading the first book in the Harry Potter series, which, of course, if you clicked on this in YouTube, then you fucking know what episode this is, right? But whatever, I'm saying it. I'm saying it in anyway, okay? It's episode number 8. We are reading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, English, British, whatever you want to call it, edition, not the U.S. edition. Although we are abridging, so I just get to point out the differences, not so much read them all. And yeah, the 8th chapter in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is called The Potions Master. Pause while we roll our eyes about Snape collectively. All right. I'm sure there are plenty of Snape lovers out there, and I'm not. Snape is a complex character, okay? I know I said that about Dumbledore. That's going to be, but fuck, man, he is. But I have more issues with Snape. But anyway, well, let's not go there all. I'm just telling you who the chapter's named after. Let's track some fucking trains, okay? Here we go. So the setup for the beginning of the chapter basically is the fact that we're getting a little look into the notoriety of Harry and the Harry? What the fuck was that? The notoriety of Harry. Harry Potter. Anyway, right. So we're getting a look at the notoriety of Harry, the fact that he's like, I almost said it again. He's as he's making his way around the school, like everybody's like, hey, that's Harry Potter over there next to the tall redheaded kid. Yeah, did you see him? The scar? Did you see that shit? Holy fuck, man. Yeah. So there's a lot of that, you know. I mean, and truth be told, this is not limited to the beginning of Harry's school experience. In fact, quite the opposite. It's just the beginning. Like, there's always, maybe not always, but often something to do with Harry that gives him looks or stares or whatever else. You know, it is what it is. It's in this particular case. I mean, there's nothing he can do about it. But it's still we're getting a look at it. There's that. And we get a little bit of insight into what it's like to navigate Hogwarts. When you're brand new there and you've never been there before, and we're told that there are 142 staircases at Hogwarts. Wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, and some that led on a different place on Friday. Which they do show moving staircases in the movies to kind of imply that sometimes things change. But of course, in the movies, they kind of ramp it up a little bit to make it seem like shit's moving everywhere all the time. And I don't really... Of course, they don't do that later, but they do in the first book. I mean, the first movie, as I remember. But I don't remember certainly. I pick the screenshots after I do the episode, so I don't actually know for sure. But I feel like my memory of the first movie is that things are a little more happening with the staircases and whatnot. Anyway. And so there's like some extra silly things too that like don't, for the most part, don't really come up again. With I guess maybe the exception of the entrance to the kitchens, but they talk about doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely, or if you tickled them in exactly the right place, which is the part that I was thinking about. And fake doors that are really just the wall, blah, 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 blah. So a lot of ways to get lost is really the point. Well, the point now, but the other point is to sort of let you know that there's a lot of places to sneak around in this fucking school. Like, a lot. Get mention of the ghosts again, that they're sometimes just like popping up and they could scare the hell out of you. And it is mentioned that nearly headless Nick is helpful to the Gryffindors. However, then we get mention of Peeves again, the poltergeist, and the fact that he's just basically the absolute, prankster in chief beyond even Fred and George, because he's not a student, he's not a human, he's not a person. So he, aside from the Bloody Baron, he pretty much has nobody to. I mean, I guess the teachers could stop him from doing things, especially McGonagall and Dumbledore. But point being, he wreaks havoc. And we get mention again of Argus Filch. A little bit more information is mentioned this time around than the first time he's brought up in the opening feast. And basically, it's just that nobody likes him. He's always, on the lookout for students doing, something they're not supposed to be doing. And we get a mention of his cat, of course, Mrs. Norris. Why she's Mrs. Norris and not Miss Norris as well, I've never thought about that before just now, truth be told. So, whatever. And we get a mention of her bulging lamp-like eyes that are just like Filch's. So, just that whole lurking and looking thing. But yeah, so there's like somehow, even though Filch is a squib, there's somehow a magical connection between him and his cat. I mean, I'm just reading, man. That's what the book says. Anyway, yeah, like you apparently you do some dumb shit. I fuck up in front of the cat, and next thing you know, Filch shows up just seconds later. But hey, I mean, whatever. I mean, it's a magical school, so anything's possible, I suppose. Who knows? Maybe Dumbledore set up some sort of charm or something. Fuck if I know. I've never questioned that before now either. This is like the really interesting thing about doing this is like, even with the stuff, like I pre-read this chapter, I even made a couple notes. I don't know how much I'll use them, but sometimes just as you're going through this and you're explaining it to somebody, all of a sudden things that you'd never thought about in like the many rereadings and re-listenings for enjoyment and some detail. But honestly, after like 2 or 3 times through, like, you're not really listening for detail most of the time, even though you will pick up things here and there. But yeah, squib. But and now I'm reminded of Mrs. Fig and her squib ass, and the fact that she has a bunch of cats. Maybe there's like a magical creature cat thing going on that squibs like can get down with, and they have like an extra sensory communication, because they're still not just regular muggles. There's something about them that makes them different. And I wonder, are there degrees of squibs? Are there like squibs that are like, man, you almost have enough midichlorians in your blood to make you a full-grown wizard, full-blown wizard. You know what I'm saying? Like, these things that things. Moving on. And we find out that Harry and Ron, of course, get in trouble. Well, kind of get in trouble with Filch. Almost get in trouble with Filch at the beginning of their first day, because they're trying to get through a door, and next thing you know, it turns out that door leads to the out-of-bound corridors that Dumbledore warned them about on the 3rd floor. So yeah, and of course he wouldn't believe that they're lost, which of course in this particular case, for once, they're fucking lost because it's their first day of school. And then, as it turns out, Quirrell saves the day. There's no real mention of how or what, but just that he rescued them. And that's one of the things that I guess most fiction writers do that to a certain degree, but Rowling definitely does it as a device too, to sort of, some things are described and some things are just mentioned, and the way it's mentioned, you don't really necessarily need to question much about, the detail. I'm sure everybody does this, whatever. This is not a good tangent. Let's continue. Wait, did I go back a page? There we go. Yeah, okay, yeah. No, nobody likes Mrs. Norris, obviously. Nobody likes Filch, because, he's never doing anything he's the caretaker, right? But that's like the most ironic title. Anyway, all right, enough Filch. And then we finally get a look into some of the lessons themselves. And so this is one thing that I was thinking about when I was reading through this earlier. Magical education is kind of it's a hodgepodge of like very useful stuff, marginally useful stuff, and complete bullshit. And maybe that is, I wasn't actually thinking about that part earlier, because I was just kind of making the questions, but maybe that's just a mirror of how education is in general. I guess there are a lot of things that we all studied in school looking back that we don't use hardly at all anymore. Meanwhile, things that would really be practical and useful, we don't learn anything about. But anyway, yeah, magical education. It's just, it's, I don't know. We'll look at more of this, but let's continue. So we get a list of the classes and the teachers that Harry has on day 1. Or maybe I should say we just get a list of all the teachers that he has in this term. I think actually is pretty much the case. We have, well, actually, it's interesting too. Like, not everything is. She selectively fleshes out the situations that are going to have more bearing on the future. So, like, it's mentioned that they go every Wednesday and do astronomy or whatever, which, again, like, useful in the magic in this world. Maybe if you're a centaur, but I don't know. And it's interesting that it's just on Wednesday too. Like, that's like a different kind of class. And then 3 times a week, of course, they have herbology, with Professor Sprout, who is a competent teacher, actually. Like, one of the more competent teachers, actually. Like the more of the scenes that take place in Sprout's classroom, which there aren't that many, actually demonstrate like good lessons. Simple, nothing really complicated necessarily, but she's given them like practical like things to do with plants that they might actually use. Not all of them. Some of them are obviously just like dangerous, and she's explaining how they're dangerous, and sometimes they're helping her, not pollinate. What do you say? Like, anyway, propagate, whatever shit. But anyway, yeah, like herbology, however the fuck you want to say it, useful class. Sprout, solid teacher, and actually a really good representative and the head of Hufflepuff House. And of course we get mention of history of magic, which does sound like the most boring shit on earth. How Hermione even herself pays attention in this class is beyond me, but whatever. And it's taught, history of magic is taught by the only ghost teacher that we have at Hogwarts, Professor Binns, with the little anecdote that's mentioned more than maybe it needs to be, but whatever. The little anecdote that he grew very old and been teaching for a long time, and one day he fell asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Which is interesting, but that can't really be the way it actually happened if what we learn later about how the ghost thing works in this world, there was a choice made, not just some magical waking up as a ghost outside of your body. I don't think. See, this, wow, breaking it all the way down. Let's see here. And Flitwick is next on our roll call of teachers. He is the little person representative of the Hogwarts universe. Well, the Hogwarts staff. Let's just narrow that fucking down. And he is the charms teacher. He's also a reasonably competent teacher and a class that seems to have a fair amount of legitimate use from what I can tell. Not always. Some things are kind of silly, but I mean, you have to start with smaller stuff, obviously, to build. But yeah, most of the charms are things that ultimately become useful for Harry and just for wizards in general. Not all of them, but all right, I just said that twice. All right, let's do. Shugga, chugga, shugga, chugga, shugga, chugga. That was my train back on the track with the track on the train and the track of the train. Professor McGonagall, who, as we've already kind of gotten a look at, is, not like any of the other teachers. Well, I guess the one she has the most in common with is Snape, but she's still a lot cooler and nicer than that. But she is strict, and she doesn't tolerate bullshit in her class. And she gives them, her little speech about how transfiguration is complex and dangerous. And if you mess around, you will not be allowed to stick around, basically. You have been warned. And then she does a cool little trick. See, that's the thing about McGonagall. She gives you the big serious speech and then turns her desk into a pig and back. So she does have a sense of humor. She knows how to smile. She's not necessarily an unpleasant person. I think it's just that most likely she's just had to deal with a lot of bullshit over the years, and so as a result of that, she just doesn't allow it. She wants to teach, but she doesn't want to babysit. So she doesn't allow people to act like babies. Basically, that's my summary of how McGonagall works. There's more to it than that, obviously, but that's why it's a summary. And then, of course, we get mentioned that everybody was looking forward to Defense of the Dark Arts class, but as it turns out, Quirrell is a joke. Oh, look, it actually says that. That was the word that came to mind, but it does say a bit of a joke. And there's mention that his classroom smells strongly of garlic. Then the whole vampire thing, and then his turban smells funny, and he says that he got his turban from an African prince for getting rid of a zombie, but nobody believes him because he's obviously scared of everything. But again, we learn that Quirrell's not exactly what we think he is. So yeah, he just basically doesn't do. There's not much mentioned about his class that actually that's of any useful information or anything like that. And then it's mentioned that Harry finds out that, as it turns out, what Hagrid told him before he went to school was actually true, that he's not so far behind after all, and that like a lot of people in the class don't know much, even as he says, people like Ron weren't that far ahead. And that just goes to show you that, obviously there are going to be several Muggleborns, but then there's like a lot of kids that don't learn tons of magic from their parents. They probably see, basic stuff. And honestly, I'm sure if things were maybe just a little bit more accurate and not just for the sake of this being the first year of Harry's schooling, Ron would probably know a little bit more than he does just simply from being around. I mean, they do give him all the pop culture information. He knows all like the rules, and he knows the government stuff because Mr. Weasley's at the Ministry, and he knows about Quidditch, and he knows about a lot of, like, Ron is sort of like the common sense guru / radar in terms of the wizarding world. Doesn't mean he's always right. Obviously he's not always right, but like he just has like I don't know. He's actually a pretty good moral compass too. Not always. It's more about the common sense thing. Let's not go too far off on that part. But he knows a lot of things. But for some reason, when it comes to the actual magic, and I know you don't get a wand, but you would just think, well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe his parents used a lot of non-verbal spells. It's the first book in the series. That's what we're going to say about that. And we're moving on. And then, of course, you get the one class that nobody's really looking forward to, at least not amongst the Gryffindors, and especially not after the first time. But double potions with the Slytherins. It's really kind of the ultimate shit sandwich of school here. Class with the shittiest classmates and with the shittiest teacher. Okay. Maybe not the shittiest teacher, but let me just say, well, first of all, it's obvious that Snape is brilliant. Like, that's not in question. His knowledge about potions, his knowledge about dark arts, his knowledge about magic in general is quite up there. He's probably, I don't know, top 5 characters in the whole fucking series as far as, like, skill and knowledge is concerned, especially the knowledge part. But his skill's really, really good, too. So that is contrasted with somebody who is basically a bitter person, an unhappy person. And the thing about it is like the thing he's unhappy the most about, there's not a damn thing he can do about it. And it's been 11 years. That's a long fucking time. I don't care what the tragedy in your life is. I'm not saying that those things ever leave you. But yeah. Anyway. So Snape. This is the guy we're talking about. Then yeah, they're like, I wonder, we hear that Snape favors the Slytherins. We'll find out if it's true. Oh yeah, you will. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We get the mention of potions, but we're not actually there yet. So real quick, before we go there, we have the mention of how the post works. I know that's just way more interesting, right? But anyway, yeah. Every day and during breakfast, a bunch of owls swoop in, and if you have a letter, your owl swoops to you and drops it, or some owl will swoop to you and drop your letter. And it's mentioned that up to this point, Hedwig has not come to visit Harry, but on this day, whatever this day happens to be, Hedwig does come down to see him and drops him something off. And it's a note from Hagrid inviting him to tea. Because that's what you do when you're English. You invite people to tea. It's a separate event. I kind of love that. I'm not going to lie. I'm not mocking it. And so Harry's like, of course, yeah. Send that back. And then... what I was already talking about. Fucking Snape. And yeah, he's like, it's a good thing I have Hagrid to look forward to later because this sucks. And yeah, it's mentioned that at that start of term banquet, the beginning of feast, that Harry got the idea that Snape disliked him, but by the end of this lesson, he figured out that he was wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. And that's... I guess some people would say that Snape overdid it or that he faked. I disagree completely. First of all, the evidence is really in The Prince's Tale. You hear him complaining to Dumbledore. He doesn't like him. Anyway, and so, yeah. Of course, the other thing is that as time goes on in this story, like, Snape continues to be built to be more and more of a villain and not just an antagonist, you know? And so we have to set him up as a pretty strong antagonist from the get-go for him to be able to grow into a potential villain. So he's a fucking dick, like, from day one. And that's like, it's not like Harry did anything wrong. It's not like Harry is responsible for what happened to his parents. It's not like Harry's responsible for what fucking happened to Voldemort when he tried to kill Harry. He's not, I mean, he just came to fucking school. That's point blank period. Day one or maybe day 2 or 3 at school, whatever day his first day to take potions is. And he's in the class like everybody else, as ignorant as most, with the exception of Hermione, because she's fucking Hermione. And that she's like practically superhuman with her learning. But even though I know that there are probably plenty of people in the group and that are just listening in general that identify with Hermione, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is that she's got the memorization skills of like a computer. So yeah, Snape, just like Flitwick, starts the class by taking the roll, or the register, as it were, in England. I'm pretty sure. I don't know for sure if they changed this, but most likely the U.S. edition says roll, because that's what we say. They call the roll, and they don't take the register. But, you know, it's the little things. And yes, as soon as and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name, but that's where things start to differ. Much like, you know, season 2 or 3 of Game of Thrones, that's where things start to diverge from the two. And yeah, Snape's like, Harry Potter, our new celebrity. I can't do a very good Snape, but fuck, man. And we get an instant look at the fact that the Slytherins are going to just eat this shit alive. And so it's really just like potions becomes like a, not so much just a torture for Harry, it's a torture for Neville. It's more like an endurance test for Harry and like just a test in general. And he doesn't always pass that test, by the way. Harry's temper is a fucking problem. But see, I'm not, you start thinking that I'm going to say things about certain characters and not others. Don't think that. I pretty much got something to say about everybody. Because, god damn it, Harry. Like, fuck, man. Anyway. But we're good right now. He's just, he's too new to understand how outraged he needs to be. But it doesn't take long. And we get mention, of course, of eye color again, except that we see that Snape's eyes are black also, like Hagrid's, but that they have none of Hagrid's warmth. And that's for fucking sure. I don't know when the last time Snape had a warm thought. Over a decade before this story starts. Anyway. And Snape gets into his little opening speech to set up how he feels about potions and how you can learn how to stop a death, brew fame. I can't even find the words. I just know that he says them. Brew glory. Yeah, bottle fame, brew glory, whatever. That shit. And you kind of just get the sense that, like, if Snape had his druthers and he doesn't, let's keep it real, he wouldn't even be a teacher. Like, I don't think. Like that, I mean, why else would you just say to a class, like, unless if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach? Like, yeah. But working at Hogwarts, being a teacher, safe job for a former Death Eater. Spoiler alert. And so Snape then goes about, like, throwing, like, random potions ingredients out at Harry and seeing if he can name what they would combine to give him. And of course Harry doesn't know. Harry we saw the book list earlier. It's a lot of books. You skim through them, you look at some things, and then you plan to go to school and learn. You don't, unless you're Hermione. Again, if you're Hermione, then you read all your books and somehow you memorize all of them like a fucking Xerox machine, and then you can raise your hand at every question. Every fucking question. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, Snape is already pretty much intimidating and making fun of Harry in front of the class. And Harry does the best he can the first few times that he does this to just, be like, I don't know. He doesn't do it in any kind of... He's not being a smart ass, whatever the fuck. He's not talking back. And then, he does 3 different things. And Hermione's, like, meanwhile, like, practically pissing herself, raising her hand. Like, me, call me, me, over here. Hey, me, me. That's pretty much Hermione the whole time. And so, finally, after, like, Snape's done this shit 3 times, Harry's like, I don't know, but I think Hermione does. Why don't you try her? And, I mean, I know, it is a little sarcastic. But for fuck's sake, man, like, A, he obviously doesn't know, and B, Hermione's, like, about to, like, pop a fucking blood vessel over here. So, like, he's just trying to help. I mean, I'm just saying. So yeah, instead of allowing Hermione to answer, he asks her to sit down, because by the time he's asked the 3rd question, Hermione's like can't contain her seat. She has to keep her hand raised and stand up, like to make sure that she's seen. And so then Snape proceeds to tell Harry what the things are, and what the ingredients would combine to make. We find out that one of them was the draft of living death. We find out that a bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat that will work as an antidote to many poisons. Most, it says. And those are the. And then Snape's like, "Why aren't you all copying this down?" I'm sure that's how he sounded too. Um, and so, of course, everybody, gets to copying. And then Snape proceeds to take a point from Gryffindor for Potter's cheek. And I mean, really, like the Hermione comment was worth taking a point away. Now, granted, we also learned that this is the first year of Hogwarts, or you don't necessarily. If you just look at this and you look at how things progress, like the fact that he only took 1 point is actually kind of it's indicative of the fact that it's the first year, and so it's things are going to scale up. That's what I'm trying to say. This same kind of thing had happened a year or two later. It would have been 5 or 10 points from Gryffindor, not 1. So even though Snape is being a complete dick, he's still kind of like, I think if he took too many points, like Dumbledore or even McGonagall might be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, obviously it was you. So he's starting small. But anyway, yeah. And so then they get set to actually like brewing a potion. And so this is the other thing I was going to say about, actually, before I go further, about Snape and his classes. Like, aside from his like occasional little speeches or whatever, it seems like, and I guess, again, it's been a little while, so I might be wrong about this, but it kind of feels like to me that like most of what Snape does is like let you into his room, put some shit up on the board, and then tell you to do it. And it's like, I don't know. To me, that is that really a class? Is that how you learn? I mean, I guess. I don't have to remember if Slughorn does much different. I feel like he definitely at least talks about the potions a little bit more, but Anyway, so then we get a little look at the fact that, of course, Snape does favor Slytherin, and especially Draco Malfoy, because we got to set him up to be an antagonist also. And, there are connections between the Malfoy family and Snape at this point, so favoritism in full motherfucking physics. And so right as Snape's about to praise Malfoy's potion, we then get a chance to see that Neville, poor Neville, he's at the bottom of the scale here when it comes to dealing with potions and dealing with Snape's demeanor in general. Neville, just as he starts Hogwarts, is a pretty weak-willed, weak-minded character, but what we learn is that it's not destined to stay that way for him. So yeah, I mean, and I don't mean that as a criticism of Neville. It's just the way that it is. It's just shit's happened, man, and it hasn't been a pleasant ride for young Longbottom. Anyway, yeah, so Neville he was paired up with Seamus, and he somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron, and whatever the resulting not right potion that's spilling everywhere is like, burning holes in people's shoes, and Neville's gotten covered in it, and he's breaking out in boils and shit, and things are not looking so good. So, of course, Snape sends this does the sensible thing and sends Seamus to take Neville to the hospital wing. So that's out of the way, tragedy averted, right? But no, then he has to pick on Harry again and be like, oh, so why didn't you tell him to do the thing that he was supposed to do when he was supposed to do the thing? You were trying to get more attention for yourself, huh? And like, really, Snape? Like, are you in first year? Like, are you a preteen? 'Cause fuck, man, that's like some of the lamest shit I've ever heard. Anyway, And he takes another point away from Gryffindor. And again, it's just 1 point. But again, he's starting on a small scale. So just like dick move after dick move. Like the whole class is just like, look out, here comes the dick moves. And after that one, Harry's like about to say something like, dude, this is so fucked. But like right as he's like getting ready to, Ron's like kicks him and it's like, nah, dude, no. This Snape can get nasty. Don't do it. So he doesn't. And then, after class, Ron's like, Snape's always taking points away from Fred and George. It's cool. Don't even trip. But, like, obviously, now, not to say that Ron's trying to conceal anything, because Ron doesn't know anything. But it's still like, Ron's not the object, so he can't fully relate. But he obviously sympathizes. Anyway, so then Ron's like, is it cool if I come with you to Hagrid's? And of course that's not a problem. And so they head out to go to Hagrid's little hut, which is probably not that little, but his hut nonetheless, down near the edge of the forbidden forest. And we get the setting. There's a crossbow outside and some galoshes. And then we hear Fang barking. Oh, Fang. Big, useless, great dog that you are. So yeah, they knock and Fang is barking and jumping at the front door, and Hagrid has to pull him back, and he lets them in, and then we find out that Hang... Why am I trying to call Fang Hang? What the fuck? Twice now. Twice. All right, we're going to try to really avoid a third Hang by accident. Oh, I do see the word hang on the page. Maybe that's what it was. Fuck. Anyway, Fang is a large black bullhound, even though I don't see that on the page now, but he is that. And then, of course, as soon as they get in, we find out that Fang is really not vicious. He's just excited. And so he's licking Ron's ears now. And it's mentioned that, like Hagrid, Fang was clearly not as fierce as he looked. And that's a legitimate point about both characters, although Hagrid can be fierce when he needs to be. Fang is pretty much a straight-up coward, and we'll learn that a few times. Great dog as a pet, but, not the one you take to war with you. Direwolf, Fang is not. And so, Harry introduces Ron, because this is the first time Ron's met Hagrid in person, and of course, as soon as he sees him, he's like, "Oh, another Weasley, huh?" But instead of in contrast to when Malfoy's like, "Oh, you must be a Weasley," Hagrid, has a more humorous anecdote about the fact that he says he's spent half his life chasing Ron's twin brothers away from the forest, and I'm like, Hagrid. Is that just a phrase? That's just a phrase, right? Like, I'm being too nitpicky when I'm like, there's no way on earth. They're too young and you're too old for you to spend half your life doing anything related to them, even if they were your children. Right? Like, am I right, folks? I'm not missing something here, right? He's just using half me life as half me life as a figure of speech, right? That's Jorge. I'm gonna need your help here. Right. And we get a little hint of the fact that Hagrid's cooking is not really that great because he made rock cakes and they're like nearly breaking their teeth on them. But of course they pretend to enjoy them. That's another thing. Like, they don't really ever tell Hagrid that this food's shit. They just did not decline it most of the time. Unless they're really trying to butter him up for something. Yeah, we find out that Hagrid doesn't like Filch either, because nobody likes Filch. Which is, does call into question why Dumbledore even has him there, but I guess he figures he just serves a purpose. I don't know. There's some funny things about the place, but hey, that's kind of what makes it great. And then Harry brings up Snape to Hagrid and how he seemed to hate him, and Hagrid's like, "Nah, what are you talking about? Why would Snape hate you? That's don't know what you're talking about, dude. No idea." And then immediately he changes the subject. And Harry's like, whoa. That seems a little intentional. I think there's more than he's letting on there. But nonetheless, they get into this whole conversation for a second about, Charlie and what he does with the dragons. And of course, Hagrid is interested in dragons. So even though he changed the subject, obviously, it's just something he's interested in. So, and while they're talking, Harry sees a cutting from the Daily Prophet on the table, and he picks it up. And here we get the first seeds of the real mystery of the story of this particular novel, because they all the books, they tell an overarching story, and that is the main story. It's not let's not get it twisted. That is the main story. However, each book sort of has its own mystery or conflict that needs to be resolved, and it's usually resolved right around the end of the school year, conveniently, or thereabouts. I mean, I'll give her credit. It's like she does do the best she can to kind of like, sometimes the later books start before school and end after, or end before the term's actually supposed to end. It's not always neat and proper, but nonetheless, the way it works out at each book, there's a mystery and or a conflict, and not to say there's only just one, but there's usually like a central one that gets resolved in some way. And it's not even that it's always a neat bow either, but it is Harry Potter. It's not A Song of Ice and Fire, so things do. Even with all the loss, there's still like moments where like, in other series, a character might die and they don't, or whatever, I don't know. She still puts Harry through hell, in my opinion. So it's just, yeah. Maybe not a traditional children's book, but still with still cognizant of the fact that that's the target audience for, first-time readers are people that are roughly Harry's age. So anyway, Harry picks up the cutting from the Daily Prophet, and it turns out that it's more information about this break-in that he heard about, that Ron told him about earlier. I think it was Ron. And we find out that it happened on the 31st of July, which is Harry's birthday, which means that it's the day they were at Gringotts. And so he speaks up, and he's like, that break-in happened the day we were there. It could have happened while we were there. And Hagrid definitely doesn't meet Harry's eyes this time, and just kind of doesn't even give an answer. He grunts and offers more rocks cakes. And Harry, has to think about it some more, and it's like, didn't that vault get empty? It says in the article that the vault was emptied the same day, and he's like, well, wait a minute. Hagrid emptied that one vault, even though all it had was that one little grubby package in it, but he emptied it on that day, and it says in the article that the vault had been emptied earlier that day before the attempted break-in. So, mysteries afoot. And so that's kind of the end of the situation with Hagrid there. They don't really talk about anything else. And we move forward to Harry and Ron headed back to the castle for dinner with a bunch of rock cakes that they're never going to eat. And Harry ponders that, or thinks that none of the lessons he'd had so far had given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. And yeah, I mean, did Hagrid collect the package just in time? Where is it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? These questions and more will remain questions for a while. But that is the end of the chapter. And so, let's see if there's anything in my notes that I didn't cover. Random. Okay, it's so small, but nonetheless. When Harry gets his note from Hagrid about the tea that we just witnessed at the last scene, he mentions Hedwig's name in the letter. Harry didn't name Hedwig until he got home to the Dursleys, so even though Hagrid did buy him Hedwig, how did he know the name already? Just, and then the rest of it was about the magical education. I mean, we covered all the topics that we need to cover for right now. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Harry Potter Abridged. Do the like and the comment thing if that's how you're feeling about life. I would love it. It makes me feel good, Tell me things you'd like me to do, not do, whatever. Any of those things. I'm not making any promises, but I like to hear from you. And of course, any comments about the specific things that I said or any questions that I asked, obviously those are especially nice to have. That's gonna do it for us. So, thank you for listening, and have a lovely day. Peace.